In this topic, you will learn the typical split of responsibilities among the stock processes and the impact on the stock of the various business flows. Now, we can find in stock organization 4 different roles. There's the stock manager, who's in charge of the accuracy of the stock levels and of the organization of the different material handlers. They also define the stock rules about the stock management, the reordering, and the stock count. They control the transactions done by the material handlers and initiate stock adjustments when necessary. They also decide the allocation to ensure respect of the FIFO, for instance. Now, there's also the role of material handlers, who feed the system by entering stock transactions such as supplier receipts and returns, location and status changes, delivery and customer returns. In addition, they contribute to the main stock processes, including stock count, quality control, packaging, and shipment preparation. Finally, they ensure the stock identification by labeling each stock received. Now, there's also the material buyer, who is responsible for balancing the risk of shortages with the risk of excessive stock. They analyze procurement suggestions done by the system and submit purchase requests to the buyer. And finally, the controller, who's in charge of the correct valuation of the stock. Now, there are also related user permissions. As you can see here, the stock manager is the manager of material handlers, so he has access to all functions accessible to the material handlers. You can see here an exact of the main function associated with the different stock roles to match the split of responsibilities. By default, there are preset users in the system matching these definitions. What's the impact on the stock by the business processes? Well, stock levels are impacted by purchasing flow during the supplier receipt and during the supplier return validation. Both transactions are usually done by the material buyer. The receipt increases the stock level and return decreases the stock level. In addition, purchase orders increase the projected stock at the date of the expected receipt. On the contrary, the supplier return creation generates an allocation, thus decreasing the projected stock. Now, stock levels are also impacted by the sales flow during the shipment validation and during the customer return. Shipment validation is usually done by the stock manager to validate the material handler transaction, and the customer return is also usually done by the material handler. The shipment decreases the stock level, and on the contrary, the customer return increases the stock level. In addition, sales orders decrease the projected stock at the date of the expected delivery. Now, for manufacturing and subcontracting, the material tracking is the issue of the component consumed in the manufacturing process, thus decreasing the stock level. On the contrary, the completed quantity tracking is the stock receipt of the manufactured good, thus increasing the stock level. Now, in this flow, usually work order tracking is done by the labor, but location change of the component with the storage location to the job floor location is done by the material handler. In addition, the work orders increase the projected stock of the manufactured good at the date of the planned end date of the work order. On the contrary, the work orders decrease the projected component stock at the date of the planned start of the date of the production. In a similar way, the subcontract orders have material tracking decreasing the stock level of the components and receipt increasing the stock level of the subcontract component. Now, in addition, the projected stock followed the same logic, anticipating the actual stock movements. In this flow, the material handler creates the delivery of the stock to provide to the subcontractor and the subcontract receipt. There's also internal flows. The stock count process ends with stock adjustment, either positive or negative. Usually, the stock manager organizes and validates the count, and the stock handlers perform the actual count and record the results in the system. Now, their internal replenishment drives the replenishment of the consumption area by generating location change. The stock manager creates the reorder list and dispatches the list among the material handlers, and the material handlers validate the list once the location changes have been done. And finally, the storage plan drives the storage of the dock location. The stock manager creates the storage list and dispatch lists among the material handlers, and material handlers validate the list once the storage has been done. Now you have had an overview of the stock business, including understanding the typical split of responsibilities among the stock process and the impact on the stock of the various business flows. Let's take a look at the business processes. Now, the business processes I'll present to you are organized per role, like material handler, stock manager, material buyer, and finally, the controller. Now, these processes ease the navigation in the system toward the right function or report, thanks to the ability to jump directly into each process. Each user can be linked to one or many business processes. We'll start off with the material handler. We'll go to our landing pages, and in the left list, we'll select material handler and go to business processes for material handler. We'll start off with incoming with receipts. Now, receipts process is one of the most important processes of material handler role. This process drives in from the expected delivery of the day, from the receipt creation function to the label printing function. In addition, various inquiries and reports are available, such as the stock movements inquiries, allowing him to inquiry all stock information based on a large set of selection criteria. There's also outgoing and specific shipments. Now, for shipments, this process is one of the most used processes among our customer base. As you can see, there are multiple steps. Some are optional, such as prepare, pack, or parcel content. Usually the flow starts with a list of shipments to do for a current day or for the day after. In large organization may need the shipment preparation step to better organize the collection of all the stock to ship. Finally, the shipment is created. Afterwards, various inquiries are possible. Then there's the stock count. Now, for the stock count, this is important activity of the material handler as well. From the count list, material handlers go into the appropriate stock area and do a physical count. The quantity counted is then entered in the system using the counts function, then validated to update the stock. As always, multiple inquiries are available to review. Now let's take a look at the stock manager business processes. Now let's go to the stock manager, and let's start off with the inventory setup. Now, the stock manager is responsible for defining the main stock data, including units of measure, quality, preparation, packaging, and locations. Also, they're responsible for the stock counts. Now, in the stock counts, what they do is they organize the annual and periodic counts. To do so, he creates count sessions, prints the different count lists to dispatch the work across the material handlers. They review the count quantities, validate and close each count list. Also, it's analyzed. They do this to detect errors, to identify obsolete stock, and to prevent stock shortages. They also use a large quantity of inquiries and reports to assist. And then we have the material buyer processes. Now, material buyer processes go to reorder. Now, the main process of a material buyer is to analyze procurement suggestions and validate them in purchase requests. To do so, the material buyer accesses a list of suggestions. Using the workbenches, he can validate the relevancy of the suggestions by turning them into purchase requests, or he can group the different suggestions in a large purchase request to benefit better purchase conditions to provide him the necessary information he has a large set of inquiries to do so. And finally, there is the controller. Now, the controller would also be managing costs. It's important for the controller to define the different costs: standard, revised, standard, budget, and simulated costs. Now, he uses the process to access the standard cost manual entry function and to the cost calculations function. Performs controls, cost comparison inquiries are also available as well. Now, once the definition costs are done, they analyze the costs as well. They check the accuracy of the results. To do so, the cost control has access to purchase, production, and subcontracting cost inquiries. Finally, before the posting, he can check the stock and the WIP values using all the reports that are available to them. So now you've learned how the business processes affect the stock and what roles usually perform stock transactions.